The galaxy was terrorized, until a single human warship entered orbit Part 1, the Shadow of Terror. The creatures of the galaxy no longer remembered what peace felt like. For the past 8 years, the skies above countless worlds had darkened with the arrival of the Vox collective ships, massive, twisted structures that seemed more like living nightmares than vessels. They came without warning, without mercy, and left nothing but empty husks of planets in their wake. On Talaris Prime, the last major stronghold of free worlds, the emergency council chamber hummed with tense voices. The room was circular, its high ceiling decorated with constellations representing each of the 17 allied species. Many of those stars had dimmed over recent months, symbols of worlds that had fallen silent. Kim stood at the center of the chamber, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display showing the rapidly shrinking territory of free worlds. As the elected speaker for the coalition, he had aged decades in the past few years. The weight of countless failed defensive operations showed in the deep lines around his eyes. "The mining colony on Helios has gone dark," he announced, his voice steady despite the devastating news. "That was our last significant defensive position with anti-Vox weaponry." The council erupted in panicked voices. Representative Dury of Theolari slammed his four-fingered hand on the table. "How? We had 3 battlecruisers stationed there." Kim's aide, a young officer named June, stepped forward with a data tablet. "The World Eater arrived without warning. Our cruisers didn't even have time to power up their engines." He played a brief transmission, just 15 seconds of chaos, before it cut to static. The massive shadow of the Vox flagship could be seen descending toward the colony, blotting out the sun like an eclipse. The World Eater was the stuff of nightmares, a planet-sized monstrosity that consumed entire worlds, breaking them down into their base elements to fuel the Vox war machine. Nothing had ever survived its approach. "We've lost 18 billion lives in the past month alone," said Lee, the coalition's chief scientist. Her voice was hollow as she continued. "At this rate, the Vox will reach Talaris Prime within 14 days. The room fell silent. 14 days until the end of everything. "What about the evacuation plans?" asked Gil, representing the outer colonies. Kim shook his head. "There's nowhere left to evacuate to. The Vox have cut off all hyperspace routes except the ones they're using for their advance. For years, the coalition had tried everything. Diplomatic, outreach, the emissaries never returned, massive fleet engagements all ended in total losses, and even attempts to understand the Vox biology. The research teams were found with their minds completely wiped. Nothing worked. The Vox weren't interested in conquest in the traditional sense. They didn't want subjects or resources. They simply consumed. Their massive biomechanical ships broke down organic matter, converted it to energy, and used it to expand their fleet. Entire ecosystems, civilizations dating back thousands of years, all reduced to fuel. "Perhaps it's time we consider the unthinkable," whispered Tana, the eldest council member. Everyone knew what she meant, the suicide protocols. Better to destroy their own worlds than let them feed the Vox machine. Kim was about to respond when June rushed back into the room, his eyes wide. "Sir, our long-range sensors have detected an unknown vessel entering the system." The main display shifted to show a ship unlike anything they'd seen before. It wasn't massive like the Vox vessels. In fact, it was surprisingly small compared to Coalition cruisers. Its design was sleek, with lines that suggested both efficiency and purpose. It gleamed in the light of Talaris Prime's sun, its hull material reflecting in ways that confused their sensors. "Is it Vox?" asked Lee, already reviewing the readings on her tablet. "No," replied June. "Completely different design philosophy. And it's broadcasting." "Put it through," ordered Kim. The speakers crackled as an unfamiliar language filled the chamber. After a moment, the ship's translation systems began to interpret. "This is Captain Park of the United Earthship Defiant. We understand you're in a difficult situation. We're here to help." The council members exchanged confused glances. Earth? No one had heard of such a world. And how could one ship, Just one. Offer help against the terror that had consumed half the galaxy. Ask where they came from, Kim instructed the communications officer, and warn them about the Vox. Before the message could be sent, the sensors blared with new warnings. 3 Vox scout ships had entered the system, the vanguard of the main fleet, no doubt. The unknown vessel will be destroyed, murmured Gil. They have no idea what they're facing. But as they watched in stunned silence, the Earthship didn't flee. Instead, it changed course directly toward the incoming Vox scouts. The Coalition members had seen this scenario countless times before. Brave ships making final, futile stands against the unstoppable enemy. What happened next would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The galaxy was terrorized, until a single human warship entered Orbit Part 2, the unknown variable. Everyone in the Coalition Command Center held their breath as they watched the small Earthship turn to face the approaching Vox scouts. The 3 Vox vessels were twisted things, half organic, half machine, with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts. Even these scout ships had torn through Coalition defense fleets with ease in past encounters. They don't know what they're doing, whispered Lee, unable to look away from the display. 1 ship against 3 Vox scouts is suicide. Kim leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the console. Something about this didn't make sense. The Earthship, the Defiant, was moving, with purpose, not panic. It positioned itself between the Vox and Talaris Prime as if it had done this 100 times before. Can we communicate with them? Kim asked. Tell them to pull back? June shook his head. They're acknowledging our signals but not responding. Wait, they're powering up something. The sensor readings from the Defiant suddenly spiked in ways that made the Coalition technicians look twice at their equipment. That can't be right, one of them said. No ship that size could generate that kind of energy. The Vox scouts had noticed the Defiant too. They broke formation, spreading out, to surround the smaller ship, a hunting tactic they'd used countless times before. Their organic hulls pulsed faster, charging their devastating energy weapons. The first Vox fired, a stream of sickly green energy that had cut through the strongest Coalition shields like they were nothing. Everyone in the command center winced, expecting to see the Defiant torn apart. Instead, something impossible happened. The beam struck the Earthship and seemed to bend around it. The Defiant glowed briefly where the beam hit but showed no damage. Then it moved, faster than tracking systems could follow, and fired back. A pulse of blue-white light erupted from the human ship, striking the first Vox scout. There was no explosion, no dramatic burst of fire. The Vox ship simply came apart, its systems failing section by section until it drifted dead in space. What kind of weapon was that? Gil asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the Defiant was moving again, dancing between the attacks of the remaining 2 Vox ships. It moved like nothing they had ever seen, not with the raw power of larger vessels, but with precision that seemed impossible. Each maneuver was perfectly timed, as if the human ship knew what the Vox would do before they did it. The second Vox scout tried to retreat, attempting a hyperspace jump. The Defiant fired again. This time a different weapon that created a localized distortion in space. The Vox ship's jump failed catastrophically, its own engines tearing it apart from within. The third scout, perhaps sensing its fate, launched a swarm of biomechanical drones, a last-ditch tactic the Vox used when cornered. Hundreds of the small, deadly machines surrounded the Defiant, each one capable of burning through hull plating. That's it, sighed Tana. Even if that ship has amazing shields, no point defense system can handle that many drones. But the Defiant didn't try to shoot down the drones. Instead, it released a pulse of energy that wasn't even visible on most of their sensors. The drones simply stopped, frozen in space. Then they began to fall apart, component by component, as if some invisible force was methodically disassembling them. The third Vox ship turned to flee, but it was too late. The Defiant caught it with another precisely aimed shot, and like its companions, the scout went dark. The entire battle had lasted less than 3 minutes. Silence filled the command center. What they had just witnessed was impossible. Coalition, fleets with dozens of ships couldn't take down a single Vox scout without heavy losses. Yet this unknown vessel had dispatched 3 without taking any apparent damage. "Open a channel," Kim ordered, his voice shaking slightly. "All frequencies." When the connection established, a calm voice responded. "This is Captain Park of the UES Defiant. I apologize for the delay in communications. We needed to handle that situation first." "Who? What are you?" Kim asked, the question slipping out before he could frame something more diplomatic. There was a pause, then a light chuckle came through the speakers. "We're human. We're from Earth, and I think it's time we had a proper talk." The main screen changed to show the bridge of the Defiant. It was surprisingly simple: clean lines, functional workstations, and a crew that looked remarkably similar to many humanoid species in the Coalition. At the center stood Captain Park, a woman of medium height with short black hair and eyes that conveyed both warmth and steel. "Our scans show you have quite a gathering of leaders there," she said. "Good. What I have to share should be heard by everyone." "How did you do that?" Lee interrupted, unable to contain herself. "The weapons you used, the way your ship moved, it shouldn't be possible in a vessel that size." Captain Park smiled. "Many things are possible when you've been preparing for this fight as long as we have. Your Coalition isn't the first to face the Vox, but with our help, you might be the last to have to fear them." Something in her confidence made hope spark in the room, a feeling most had forgotten. "We've never heard of Earth or humans," said Kim. "Where have you been while the galaxy burned?" Park's expression grew serious. "Watching, learning, and developing the one thing the Vox never expected, a predator designed specifically to hunt them." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing the Defiant specifications. Even the technical-minded Lee gasped at what she saw. "This isn't just a ship," Captain Park explained. "It's humanity's answer to the Vox, and it's just the beginning." The galaxy was terrorized until a single human warship entered orbit Part 3, the humans' secret. The Coalition leaders sat in stunned silence as Captain Park's hologram hovered above the central table. Behind her, the bridge of the Defiant hummed with quiet efficiency. Her crew moved with purpose, their actions precise but relaxed, as if taking down 3 Vox scouts was just another day's work. "I understand you have questions," Park said, her voice steady and confident. "I'd have the same if I were in your position." Kim leaned forward. "You said you've been watching us. For how long?" "Humanity has observed the wider galaxy for nearly 70 years, Park replied. "We detected your communication networks long before we developed the technology to reach you." This revelation sent murmurs through the council chamber. Lee, the chief scientist, couldn't contain herself. "That's impossible. We would have detected your signals, your presence." A slight smile crossed Park's face. "That was by design. Earth is uniquely positioned. Our solar system sits within a dust cloud that absorbs most conventional scanning methods. We could hear you, but you couldn't hear us. And frankly, after seeing what happened to worlds that attracted attention, we were happy to stay hidden." Then, "Why reveal yourselves now?" asked Tana, her aged voice cutting through the murmurs. Park's expression darkened. "Because staying hidden is no longer an option. 3 months ago, a Vox scout broke through our outer defense network. It was damaged, running blind, but it found us." The hologram shifted to show footage of a Vox ship, smaller than the scouts. They'd just seen destroyed, approaching a blue-green planet. The footage showed defense platforms, dozens of them, activating around the planet. The battle was brief, but intense. "We destroyed it," Park continued, "but not before it transmitted a partial signal back to the collective. They know about Earth now, which means we no longer have the luxury of watching from the shadows." Gil, always suspicious, narrowed his eyes. "So you're here because you need our help? You're one ship against the Vox Armada?" Park actually laughed at this, a genuine warm sound that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "No. We're here because you need ours." With a gesture, she expanded the holographic display to show schematics of the Defiant. Even to the untrained eye, It was clear that the technology was far beyond anything the Coalition possessed. The Defiant is what we call a vanguard vessel. Small, fast, adaptable. Built specifically to counter Vox technology, Park explained. When that scout found Earth, it gave us something valuable. Direct access to Vox biology and technology. We'd studied them from afar for decades, but having actual Vox materials to examine, that was the missing piece. Lee moved closer to the hologram, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. These energy signatures, I've never seen anything like them. Quantum entanglement weaponry, replied Park. It bypasses Vox shielding, entirely because it doesn't interact with regular space in ways their defenses can counter. And your hull, Lee continued, the way it absorbed that energy beam. Adaptive metamaterial, said a new voice. A man had joined Captain Park in the hologram, slightly older with gray at his temples and eyes that spoke of deep knowledge. I'm Chief Engineer Jin. The hull uses a layered approach. The outer material actually feeds on energy attacks, converting them to power our systems. The Vox essentially fuel their own destruction when they fire on us. The Council was too stunned to maintain proper diplomatic procedures. Questions came from all directions. How many ships like yours does Earth have? Can this technology be shared? Why didn't you come sooner? Park held up a hand, restoring order. Let me be clear about what we're offering. The Defiant is just one ship, yes, but it's not alone, and it's not our only advantage. She nodded to someone off-screen and the hologram changed again. This time it showed brain scans, side-by-side comparisons of different species. This is the most crucial difference, Park said quietly. This is why we can fight the Vox when others have failed. Lee gasped as she understood the implications. The psychic vulnerability, Park nodded. Exactly. Every species the Vox has encountered shares a common neural structure, one that makes them susceptible to the Vox psychic influence. It's subtle at first, confusion during battle, hesitation, poor coordination. Then it gets worse. We've seen your battle records. Your ships start firing on each other. Your commanders make increasingly irrational decisions. And humans don't have this vulnerability? Kim asked. Our brains evolved differently, Park explained. Something about Earth-specific conditions and our evolutionary path created a natural shield against the kind of psychic techniques the Vox use. We simply don't process information in ways they can manipulate. This explained so much. Why coalition forces that had superior numbers and firepower still lost consistently. Why battle plans that seemed sound fell apart when contact with the Vox was made. There's more, said Jin, bringing up new data. We've been intercepting and decoding Vox communications for over 30 years. We understand their language, their command structure, and most importantly, their weaknesses. A chill ran through the room. 30 years? Earth had known about the Vox threat before many in the room had even been born. You've been preparing for this war for decades, whispered Kim, realization dawning. While we were just trying to survive, Park nodded solemnly. We had the luxury of time and distance, and we've used it well. But why help us at all? Asked Dury, speaking for many who wondered the same thing. If you have this technology, these advantages, why not just defend Earth and let the rest of the galaxy fend for itself? For the first time, Captain Park's composed expression faltered slightly. She looked down for a moment before meeting their eyes again. Because that's not who we are, she said simply. Humanity has had its share of darkness, of wars and cruelty. But we've learned that survival alone isn't enough. We need connection, community, purpose beyond just existing. She straightened her shoulders. And practically speaking, we can't win this fight alone. The Vox are still coming for Earth. We need allies, staging grounds, resources. We need you as much as you need us. The final piece of the hologram appeared. A battle plan showing coalition forces retrofitted with human technology, fighting alongside Earth ships in formations designed to counter Vox tactics. So, Captain Park said, her eyes moving from face to face around the table. Shall we begin? The galaxy was terrorized until a single human warship entered orbit Part 4. The counteroffensive, the massive coalition warship. Intrepid drifted silently in the shadow of a gas giant, its engines cold, its weapons powered down. Beside it, 5 other ships waited in perfect formation. To anyone looking, they appeared dead in space. Easy targets. That was exactly the point. On the bridge of the Intrepid, Commander Juan checked his console for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Any sign they've spotted us? His first officer, a veteran named Tay, shook her head. Nothing. The Vox supply convoy is still on course. They'll pass right through our net in about 7 minutes. Juan nodded, trying to calm his nerves. Just 3 weeks ago, this kind of ambush would have been unthinkable. The Vox always seemed to sense traps before they were sprung. But now, defiant to Intrepid, a voice came through the comm. All systems check complete. Remember, let them get nice and close before you power up. Captain Park's voice had become familiar to coalition forces over the past weeks. The Defiant might be just one ship, but it had become the backbone of their entire strategy. Understood, Defiant, replied Juan, though I still don't like being the bait. He could almost hear Park smile through the comm. The best bait is the kind that bites back, Commander. The retrofit of coalition ships had happened with astonishing speed. Human engineers had worked around the clock, installing simplified versions of their quantum entanglement weapons and providing shield modifications that offered at least some protection against Vox attacks. But the most important upgrade wasn't hardware at all. It was the command AI from the Defiant, now linked to every ship in the Coalition fleet. The AI, which the humans simply called NAV, could coordinate battlefield movements with precision no organic commander could match. It predicted Vox tactics, identified vulnerabilities, and most importantly, it was completely immune to the psychic influence that had doomed previous engagements. Contact, announced Tay suddenly. Vox convoy entering sensor range. 6 supply, ships, 2 escorts. Juan took a deep breath. Nav, confirm targeting solutions. The AI's voice was calm, almost soothing. Targeting solutions confirmed for all ships. Optimal firing sequence calculated. Await command authorization. This was the moment of truth. If the humans were wrong, if the Vox somehow detected them despite all precautions, the entire squadron would be destroyed before they could fire a shot. They're entering the kill zone, whispered Tay. Juan's hand hovered over the command key. Nav, execute Operation Thunderbolt. At once, all 6 coalition ships roared to life. Engines flared, shields snapped into place, and weapons charged, all in perfect synchronization. Before the Vox could react, the trap was sprung. The first volley caught the Vox escorts completely by surprise. Human-designed quantum torpedoes passed through their shields as if they weren't there, striking directly at vital systems. The escorts didn't explode, they simply went dark, their biomechanical systems failing catastrophically. Supply ships, attempting to scatter, reported Tay. 2 are powering jump drives. Nav, implement containment pattern, ordered Juan. The coalition ships moved with uncanny coordination, each one executing a perfect blocking maneuver to cut off escape routes. The Defiant suddenly appeared from behind a nearby moon, its engines blazing as it raced toward the trapped convoy. We'll take the lead ship, Park's voice came through. You handle the rest, Commander. What followed was unlike any battle Juan had experienced in his 15 years of service. There was no chaos, no confusion. Nav anticipated every Vox countermeasure, every evasive action. The coalition ships moved as one organism, adapting instantly to changing conditions. Within minutes, it was over. The entire Vox convoy, 6 massive supply ships carrying enough raw materials to build a dozen new warships, had been captured intact. Boarding teams report success, announced Tay, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. We've secured all targets with minimal casualties. Juan leaned back in his chair, almost unable to believe it. Send word to Coalition Command. Operation Thunderbolt is a complete success. The victory near the gas giant was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Coalition forces struck at Vox supply lines throughout the sector. With each success, morale soared. Ships that had been in hiding joined the fleet. Worlds that had surrendered rose up against their occupiers. The tide was turning. At the heart of it all was the Defiant, sometimes leading the attack, sometimes providing tactical support, but always present where the fighting was fiercest. Captain Park and her crew worked tirelessly, sharing their knowledge, training coalition forces in new tactics. "You should rest," Kim told her during one of their strategy sessions. The human captain had been awake for nearly 40 hours straight, coordinating 3 separate operations. Park smiled tiredly. "I'll rest when the World Eater is scrap." The mention of the massive Vox flagship sobered the room. Despite their recent successes, the World Eater remained the ultimate threat, a mobile planet killer that could end everything they'd fought for. "Our intelligence suggests it's gathering a defensive fleet," reported Gil. "The Vox are learning from their losses. They're adapting." Park nodded. "We expected that, which is why we need to accelerate our timeline." She called up a holographic display of the sector. The Vox are falling back to their core systems. They're consolidating their forces around the World Eater. "A last stand?" asked Lee. "No," Park replied grimly. "Something worse. Our analysis of captured Vox technology confirms our worst fears. They're converting the World Eater into a superweapon." New data appeared on the display, energy readings that made even the non-technical council members pale. "They're going to sacrifice entire hive clusters to power a directed energy weapon," Park explained. "Something capable of hitting targets across multiple systems simultaneously." "Including Talaris Prime," whispered Kim. "And Earth." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. All their victories, all their progress, it would mean nothing if the World Eater unleashed this weapon. "How long do we have?" asked Tana. 3 days, Park replied. "Maybe 4. We can't gather enough ships in time," said Gil, despair creeping back into his voice. Park stood straighter, her exhaustion seemingly forgotten. "We don't need more ships. We need one ship in the right place." She adjusted the hologram, zooming in on the World Eater's massive form. The Defiant was built for this moment. "We're going to take the fight directly to them." "That's suicide," protested Kim. "Even with your technology." "Probably," Park agreed with a surprising calm. "But we've run the simulations. It's our only shot." She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Sometimes one ship is all you need if it's the right ship in the right place at exactly the right time. The galaxy was terrorized until a single human warship entered orbit Part 5. A new galactic order, the observation deck of Talaris Prime's orbital station was packed with people from a dozen different worlds. They stood in silence, eyes fixed on the massive view screen that dominated the wall. The image showed only stars and empty space, but no one could look away. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of their sensors, the fate of the galaxy was being decided. Kim stood with the other coalition leaders, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He'd argued against this plan until the very end. The Defiant was too valuable to risk on what amounted to a suicide mission. But Captain Park had been unmovable. The Defiant was built for this, she'd told him before departing. And so were we. That had been almost 14 hours ago. The coalition fleet had engaged the outer defense ring of Vox ships while the Defiant, running silent with its revolutionary stealth systems, had slipped through toward the World Eater itself. "Any word?" Kim asked Lee, who monitored the communications array. She shook her head. "Nothing yet, but the quantum entanglement comm system operates outside normal space. We'll hear something the moment they're ready to transmit." The tension in the room was a living thing, pressing down on everyone. The last reports from their fleet had been promising. The coalition ships were holding their own against the Vox defenders. But everyone knew that battle was just a distraction. Everything depended on what happened when the Defiant reached the World Eater. "Wait," said Lee suddenly, her eyes widening. "I'm getting energy readings from the target sector." The view screen changed, showing a distant part of space. At first there was nothing visible. Then, slowly, a pinpoint of light appeared. It grew brighter, then brighter still, until it rivaled the glow of nearby stars. "Is that?" Kim couldn't finish the question. Lee's fingers flew over her console. The World Eater's weapon is activating. They're powering up the main firing sequence. The light continued to grow, a sickly green glow that seemed wrong somehow, as if it violated the natural laws of the universe. Everyone in the room knew what it meant. If that weapon fired, dozens of worlds, including Talaris Prime and Earth, would be wiped from existence in an instant. "Where's the Defiant?" demanded Gil, his voice tight with fear. "No sign of them." "On sensors," Lee replied, her own voice trembling. "They should have reached the target by now." The green light grew brighter still, pulsing like a diseased heart. Energy readings spiked off the charts. The weapon was seconds away from firing, and then something impossible happened. A tiny point of blue light appeared at the heart of the green glow. It was almost invisible at first, easily missed among the overwhelming energy of the Vox weapon, but it grew stronger, pushing back against the green like a single star fighting against the night. "It's the Defiant," cried Lee, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hope. "They've positioned themselves inside the energy stream." The blue light grew brighter, fighting against the green in a silent battle of wills. For several seconds, they seemed evenly matched, neither gaining ground, neither retreating. Then, with a flash that temporarily blinded the sensors, the blue light surged forward. The green energy of the Vox weapon bent, twisted, and then, impossibly, reversed direction. The view screen showed the energy stream flowing backward, back into the World Eater itself. "They did it," whispered Kim. "They redirected the weapon's energy." The next moment, the view screen went white with the force of the explosion. When the sensors recovered where the World Eater had been, there was nothing but expanding debris and dissipating energy. "The Defiant?" Kim asked, his voice barely audible. "Any sign of them?" Lee worked her console frantically, searching for any trace of the human ship. After several minutes, she looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Nothing. They must have been at the heart of the explosion." A somber silence fell over the observation deck. They had won. The World Eater was destroyed, the Vox command structure with it. Reports were already coming in that Vox ships throughout the sector were falling into disarray, their psychic network disrupted. But the cost— "They knew," said Tana quietly. "Captain Park, her crew, they knew they wouldn't survive." Kim nodded slowly. "One ship, that's all it took in the end." Just like she said. The celebration that followed was subdued, tempered by the loss of the Defiant and her crew. Messages of victory spread from world to world, system to system. For the first time in nearly a decade, people dared to hope for a future free from Vox terror. 3 days later, as the Coalition Council met to discuss the reorganization of the fleet, they received an unexpected message. It came on all frequencies, using the same encryption the Defiant had used. "This is Admiral Choi of the United Earth Fleet. We understand congratulations are in order." The council chamber erupted in chaos as the main view screen activated to show not one human ship, but 7, each similar to the Defiant, but larger, more imposing, and bristling with weapons the Coalition had never seen before. "Where did they come from?" demanded Gil, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Various entry points throughout the galaxy," replied the human admiral, a woman with gray-streaked hair and the same steady confidence Park had possessed. "We've been monitoring the situation. When the Defiant succeeded in its mission, we activated the next phase of the operation." "The next phase?" echoed Kim, trying to process what he was seeing. Admiral Choi nodded. "The destruction of the World Eater has fractured the Vox Collective, but they aren't defeated. Not yet. There are still strongholds throughout the galaxy that need to be eliminated before they can regroup." The implications were staggering. Earth hadn't sent just one ship. They had an entire fleet waiting in the wings, positioned strategically throughout the galaxy. "And Captain Park?" asked Lee hesitantly. "Her crew?" For the first time, Admiral Choi's stern expression softened. The Defiant was lost, but Captain Park and a handful of her crew managed to reach escape pods before the final explosion. One of our ships retrieved them just hours ago. The news spread quickly. lifting spirits throughout the coalition. It seemed fitting somehow. The captain who had changed everything had survived to see the new galaxy she helped create. In the months that followed, the alliance between Earth and the coalition deepened. Human ships working alongside coalition forces systematically hunted down and eliminated the remaining Vox strongholds. Human scientists shared their defensive technologies, helping worlds rebuild their defenses against any future threats. Not everyone was comfortable with the new arrangement. Some whispered that Earth had been suspiciously well prepared, that they had known too much about the Vox, that perhaps they had watched and waited while other worlds suffered. But such voices were few and quickly drowned out by the gratitude of the many. 1 year after the destruction of the World Eater, Captain Park stood on the bridge of her new ship, the Defiant Daku, more advanced than its predecessor in every way. As she studied star charts of unexplored regions beyond known space, a young officer approached with a data tablet. "Captain, intelligence has finished analyzing the final Vox transmission," said the officer quietly. Park took the tablet, reading the decoded message with growing concern. "Have you shown this to anyone else?" "No, ma'am. Just you, as ordered." Park nodded, dismissing the officer before returning her attention to the stars. The Vox were gone, but the message confirmed what Earth scientists had suspected for years. The collective had been fleeing from something even more terrifying lurking in the darkness between galaxies. As celebrations continued across Coalition, Worlds Park and her fellow human captains began preparing for the next war, a war that might make the Vox conflict seem like a minor skirmish by comparison. One ship had changed the course of the galaxy. Now an entire fleet would stand ready for what came next.